Welcome to the next lesson. So in this lesson, I want us to create a method, a CRUD method that allows us to give a listing of all the schools ordered or sorted by ID. Now, keep in mind we are not doing any kind of filtering as yet. The first step is to actually be able to list all the schools. So let's do that. In the next lesson, we will be able to add the filtering options. So data, schools, and let's at the bottom create our method. So I'm going to call it get all method returns a list of all the schools sorted by ID. All right. So let's it's a method on the school model, and we will name that method get all. Now, later on, we will need the name of the school, the level of the school, and the mode slice, of course, along with the other filters. So let's just put that right now. We're not going to use them until the next lesson, but ultimately, this is what the get all method will need to actually do its job. So name, level, mode, which we know is a slice. It will need the filters type. Okay, because remember we have things stored in our filters type that we need to perform the filtering. And we will return a slice of pointers to schools, okay, and an error. Okay. So in the next upcoming lessons, we're going to flesh this out. But for now, we're just going to make it basic, and we'll simply return all schools. So let's construct the query. Right, again, a very basic query. I'm going to simply say query will be select ID. Let me just make sure I'm following my own convention. Okay, good. So let me bring this back. So I will select the ID. I will select create dot. I will select name. I will select level. I will select contact. I will select phone, email, website, address, mode, and version. From schools, of course, and we're going to order by ID. All right, so that's a straightforward query. And so what I'm going to do is to simply create my timeout. Remember, we're going to use context, timeout context. So let me create a 3-second timeout context. Again, we already know about context. So I'm going to call it CTX. I'm going to have cancel be the name of the function. And of course, I'm going to say context dot with timeout. And of course, I need to provide a parent context. I'm going to use background, and I'm going to use 3 seconds. Great, so that is our context, and of course we know we need to defer the calling of the cancel function. All right, and so once we have that in place, we can go ahead and actually execute the query. Okay, and of course we will have rows and error, and we will use the query context. All right, so query context returns a pointer to a bunch of rows. So whatever rows are returned, we have a pointer to those rows, and of course we have an error. So I'm going to save the pointer in rows and error in error. And so of course I'll provide ctx, and I will provide my query. Great, so that's simple enough. And what I need to do, of course, is to check for any error. So if error not nil, then we know something went wrong, and I will simply return nil, signifying nothing, no rows were successfully. Now, assuming that we did get back our rows, the first thing we tend to do is to defer the closing of the result set. So close the result set. Okay, that's just something we do to ensure resources are cleaned up. So we say rows dot close. All right, and clearly it says preventing all right. So good. So basically, we need to ensure we release our resources. All right. So with that out of the way, let's move on. So let's initialize, all right, an empty slice to hold the school data. All right. And so again, you've seen this in the previous series. So schools will be a slice of pointers to school, and we will use the open close curly brace. All right, great. So we have a slice, all right, an initialized slice of schools. And notice open curly brace. All right, so keep that in mind. Okay. Now, once we have our slice initialized, we can now proceed to iterate over the rows that have been returned. And we're going to take each row, store it in a variable of type school. All right. And then, of course, we can proceed to put that into our schools slice. Okay, so let's do that. So let's iterate, right, over the rows in the result set. Again, this is a very common pattern. And so we're going to say for rows that next, all right, there is something in the result set. We will create a variable of type school. Okay, so type school. All right, and so we will scan right, the values from the row that we are currently looking at into the school struct, right? Which is what we have here. Okay. Or into school. Okay. So that's easy enough. We've done this so many times. So I am going to say rows dot scan. And of course, we need to provide the address. So we will use ampersand school, okay, dot ID. Okay, so the first goes in there, and we just keep doing that. So address school dot create dot, right, school dot name. We have school dot level, right, and we need to do that for all of them. Have I used error already? Yes, I have. So let's keep going, but it's inside, so it's okay. School dot contact, school dot phone, school dot email, school dot website, school dot address, and of course school dot mode. And let's not forget to use pq.array, right? And of course, school dot version. Okay. So of course, after we scan, we need to check for any errors. So if error not nil, then we know something went wrong. So I'm going to return nil, no data, and error. Okay, good. And so some of you might be asking, well, why is error not just an equal sign? And the reason why is because we are declaring it or using it inside of a for. So in essence, it becomes local. Okay, so it doesn't clash with the one outside the for. Okay, great. So with that out of the way, if we come down here and there are no errors, so let's add the school to our slice. All right, and so we're gonna say schools will be append schools, and of course we need a address of the school, because remember it's a pointer, it's a slice of pointers to school. So we're not making a copy of the school object, we're actually passing in the address of where that school object is located. Okay, so imagine if you have 1,000,000 schools, you don't want to make a make a million copies. So all you do is to pass in the pointer. Okay, I think we all know that, but I just wanted to mention it. Okay, so great. We get our row of data and we stuff it into our school object. Where is it? Here. Here. All right. And so once we have this school object, we will simply append the address of it. Okay. Now once we have done all of that and we've gone through all the rows in the results set, then we will exit the for loop. And so it means we'll be out here. And so there's only a few things we need to do. And the first one is to actually check if there are any errors, or if any errors occurred while we were processing those rows. Okay, so let's check for errors after looping through the result set. Okay. All right. So if error, and we're gonna say rows dot error. Okay. And so we're gonna say rows dot error. All right. That's the condition. And once we execute that condition, we will check to see if error is not nil. All right. Again, you should know this pattern. All right. This is the condition. If it's not true, or if it's an error, then we need to do something. Return nil, an error. Okay. Now, if everything works properly and there are no errors to report, then we can safely return the result set. So we're going to return the slice of schools. All right, and that's easy enough. So we're going to return schools. And of course, we're going to return nil. Okay, so straightforward. So I will leave it here. It's quite a bit we covered. In the next video, I want us to head over to the handler and update the handler so that we could actually now test if this get all method works. I'll see you in the next lesson.